Welcome to the Dataquest viewers. Today we have with us the winner of the Dataquest ICT Pathbreaker Award 2022, Mr. Sanjay Nayak, CEO and MD Tejas Networks. Welcome and heartiest congratulations.
Thank you. Really honored to be a part of this winning this prestigious award, and I think it's a testament to the team of Tejas Networks. So thank you again, and really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I actually, for our viewers, let me tell you that the DataQuest jury panel was unanimous in its recognition of Tejas Networks' outstanding work and contribution to India's ICT industry over recent years. The jury specifically recognized the role of Tejas Networks in breaking new ground through the pandemic and beyond to emerge as India's largest telecom products company, augmenting the Bharatnet project and helping India upgrade to 5G. So I think that's a great achievement from your side. And I think that's also a good place to start because 2022 was also the year of 5G. So can you tell us the strides first India made where we ended up with 5G, and after that mainly your company's role in this upgrade?
Yeah. So first of all, again, as I said, the citation that you said for Tejas Networks is really very encouraging for us. Uh, on a broader picture, if you look at what India has been trying to do, and many of us are technologists, and I'm sure a lot of viewers of DataQuest are hardcore techies. One of the things we always wonder is that how come we have so much of technology talent in the country? The MNCs around the world make India as the second most largest R&D center outside of their headquarters. But how come we don't have an Indian product company which can be called world class, world beater, and hopefully world scale? So I think from a Tejas perspective, that is the mission which we started this company 23 years back, myself and two other co-founders. And I'm very proud to say that it takes, first of all, a very long time. Whenever you're trying to do something very different, which is path breaking in a sense that building a first true blue product company from India, it takes a lot of time. And especially when you're talking of a systems company, which is hardware, software, and all the RF, wireless, and other technologies, it becomes a far more complicated scenario. So what Tejas has been able to do in the past 2 years in particular is that there are two or three things which I would say are macro things which happened, which are very interesting to see from a big picture. Number one was that the whole geopolitical situation in the world has changed, and communication infrastructure has become a core thing for any country. I mean, India really worked through the COVID period primarily not because of the roads or trains, but because of the telecom infrastructure. Bharatnet, you mentioned. Bharatnet was the vehicle which pretty much made sure that every village or the remotest part of the country, even where the mobile phones didn't reach, had some kind of a connectivity where government could give all the programs. So I would say communication becoming a critical infrastructure became evident. Second global change which happened is that trusted telecom products or trusted communication infrastructure became a priority because now everything from the citizens' perspective, government's perspective is on infrastructure of, and if you can't trust that, especially from certain countries, which for whatever reasons haven't been very popular post-COVID, I think that has forced that there's in the Europe, there is even a term coined, rip and replace, which basically says you got to rip out this equipment and replace it with something else. So the rip and replace opportunity around the world, the rip and replace opportunity in India, because Indian government also took a call that they will whitelist the products that can be deployed in a communication infrastructure. Those two things suddenly created a very large pull for the domestic industry from India. So for instance, if I were to look at the IT industry, you had a Y2K scenario where there was a lot of pull from the market forces to really bootstrap or jumpstart the industry, which had all the right ingredients to before Y2K. But when the Y2K happened, all of those elements suddenly became the tailwind. So in my assessment, the whole global scenario changing with respect to trusted products. And then the third part happened is I think the current government, especially after the stuff that happened at Doklam, took a very, very, I would say, strategic and bold call of really becoming Atmanirbhar in very critical areas of technologies, and telecom clearly is one of them. What that meant is that now we actually have a what I would call a perfect storm, where externally, as the geo factors are aligning, internally, India always had the talent, always the capabilities, and suddenly India as a large home market being propelled by the Atmanirbhar agenda suddenly creates a perfect storm, which I believe the domestic industry should step up. Tejas is trying our best to step up. We also are now a part of the Tata Group. So between all the things together, I feel we are now in a very interesting time for the industry.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you. That's a very detailed and very positive analysis. So I'd maybe like to pick your brains on a couple of things you mentioned. One thing that fascinates me is the Bharatnet project because if you see, landlines, fixed broadband, laptops, computers, they gave the rural areas a miss. But mobile is one thing which spread everywhere. But you and Bharatnet, now you're going back to the villages with the broadband. So maybe if you can tell a bit about that.
Very interesting. So first of all, think about this way. So when the BharatNet was conceived many years back, one of the very harmless questions people used to ask, यार गांव में bandwidth कौन चलाएगा? Who's going to put bandwidth in villages? But again, I mean, if let me tell you the law of bandwidth, the consumption of bandwidth is inversely proportional to your education level. So the less you are educated, the more you need the bandwidth, because a visual is easier to say. If you want to describe something, we can write it in 2 sentences. If you have to do a little bit less, you can speak it. But the dumbest guy will just take a video of it and a very high quality one and tell exactly this is the bug which is biting the plant, or this is the situation on the ground or whatever. And guess what? If you actually ask in a lot of the mobile operators, the consumption in many of the tier 2 and tier 3 cities of data is actually higher than the consumption in the cities per capita. So that is another area. So anyways, the point was that, I mean, jokes apart, I think bandwidth is a requirement that everybody needs, including rural villages. Now, the problem was that mobile infrastructure and the telecom operators, especially the private ones, naturally are going to go to areas which are financially viable. If you see the ARPUs in the countries, $2 at 150, 140 rupees, out of which if you again take the rural customers, he's basically on a feature phone with 2G SIMs. I don't know if many people know that India still has close to 300 feature phone users, 300. But where are those 300 feature phone users? Mostly in the villages. Now, how do they get bandwidth? How do they get a benefit of tele education or distant education as it happened during COVID? How do they go and buy stuff from e-commerce, etc., etc.? So what happened is the BharatNet, along with BharatNet, there was a parallel ecosystem or what created, which is the village level entrepreneur, VLE. So this is basically a guy sitting with a computer in a village who has a connectivity from BharatNet because he's getting 10 gigabits or whatever bandwidth. And the best part is the maintenance of these networks typically becomes a bottleneck. Someone will cut the fiber, but here you have a scenario where the VLE gets 10 rupees or 15 rupees per transaction, whether he gets your birth certificate or gets you a e-commerce or a railway ticket. So he is the guy motivated to ensure the network runs. Nobody cuts the fiber. Nobody plays the monkey. And in villages, this is how life works. I mean, if the beneficiary of that becomes the protector of that asset, I think you don't have a problem. The problem happens when the beneficiary of the asset, or rather the protector of the asset, has no interest in protecting. He, like for example, if he doesn't care about something. So this is how the BharatNet whole thing. So BharatNet, which is giving the bandwidth where mobiles didn't go, two guys who had feature phones, along with the village level entrepreneur mechanism, and a robust mechanism where naturally there was a motivation to keep the network. I mean, I'm not saying BharatNet is working perfectly. There are still places where fiber cuts happen. There are still places power is not there. That's the reality of the ground. But by and large, I would say wherever the model has worked, it has given us a good result. So I think that's an interesting way to think of. And one more thing I keep telling, I was last week at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. And one of the things which I think in World India, by the way, did get the award for the most digitally advanced things. So I mean, in fact, one of the things which I use it as a I would say what India has done well. I said in the last 3 to 4 years, India has probably been world's example of how to convert a traditional economy to a digital economy, and the BharatNet was really the foundation for doing that. So I think in a sense, a lot of interesting things are happening.
So, and interesting you mentioned the World Mobile Congress because I'm sure you must have been attending it regularly. So, initially, like 80s, we were nowhere. But now, when you say attend the World Mobile Congress, do you say, okay, we have reached, we have arrived, we have most of these things, or where are we still lacking?
Okay, so here's a reality check. So MWC, by the way, as Tejas, we did put a fairly large stall, and we had a tremendous amount of footfalls and customer interest, etc., because of two reasons. One, as I mentioned, the geopolitical reasons. So what has happened is the world at a broader level, if I were to say, is looking for an alternate ecosystem of telecom products that they can source. Because the conventional thing was that they typically bought products from US or Europe, right? That's how the world was. Then after, in the last 15, 20 years, they started to buy products from China, for example, right? And in fact, many of the operators, especially in the Western world, did a lot of effort to ensure that they had a credible competitor to their incumbents, which are the Western world suppliers. Because if you don't have credible competitors, people become complacent. Now, unfortunately, because of all the geopolitical situation in the last 2, 3 years, they're back to square one. So now, who is going to step up? I think India has the best chance because A, we have a large home market, so we get economies of scale. B, we have the talent. Nobody doubts that India has enough R&D people who can build products. And C, the government's whole push on ESDM, local manufacturing, local design-led manufacturing, I think is a very positive thing. So what we got a mindset, and in the newspapers, a lot of very large deals are being talked about in terms of a 4G deployment upgradable to 5G for one of the large public sector operators in India, which we have an opportunity to play a large role. So the world is actually seeing that, hey, here's suddenly an Indian company which is coming up and potentially going to be having the economies of scale because of the large home market, and we got to look at them seriously. So I would say there's a lot more interest for sourcing products from India than there was ever before. But I wouldn't say we are there yet. But maybe 1 or 2 years down the road, we should become seriously interesting place where people go to.
So, where do you think we are in our Atmanirbharta journey then? Because one, we have to manufacture for ourselves, and second, also provide for the world. So, where do you
Perfect. I
think?
would say that at least in the telecommunication infra side, I'm saying. So in telecom also there are two segments. One is inside the enterprises and one is in the infra. So and then the third part is the consumer, which is handsets and all that. So let me leave out the handsets and because it's a manufacturing play and a lot of mobiles are being manufactured. Let me talk about the stuff that we do, which is the infra side of things. So if you see a telecom network, there are basically three kind of things that you need in a network. One is let's call it a wireless base station, 4G, 5G, stuff like that. The second is you need fiber to the home, which is GPON, now which everybody has in terms of fiber to the home or FTTX as we call it. And then you need a transport network, the backbones, which connects the base stations, which connect the cities, which is kind of the trunks that you connect Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, etc. So there are all these three require different kind of products. I'm very proud to say that in terms of the Atmanirbhar journey, actually Tejas started out as a transport equipment company, which is basically the backbone building stuff. Then about 6, 7 years back, we got into access fiber to the home, which is how we got into the Bharatnet project. Now, in the last 3 years, we have actually now done the third bit, which is building the 4G base stations and 5G. And I'm talking of macro base stations. I'm talking of the base stations which go on the towers from which all of us are receiving our mobile signals. And I'm very proud to say that 100% indigenously designed and manufactured hardware, software for 4G and 5G base station is available in the country. So in a sense, the core infrastructure, all the three elements, we are almost Atmanirbhar in terms of design capabilities. We need to become Atmanirbhar in terms of economies of scale. And that to me is the stepping stone for going global. Because if you can win in India, if you can be successful and selling it to customers in India, whether it's a Airtel or a Jio or a Bharti or whomsoever else, I think you can win anywhere in the world. Because one of the thing about Indian market, especially in the high-tech industry, people want the latest technology, they want the highest quality, and of course, they want to pay the lowest price. So if you're going to, crack this equation, you'll be successful anywhere in the world.
Yeah. So also one more question I had on 5G is because 4G to 5G is not just about speeds. 5G is a different ball game altogether because it powers smart utilities, it's powers smart cars, Industry 4.0 and all. So do you think we are getting ready? Because when we need a tech upgrade tomorrow, 5G, it's not going to be telecom anymore. It's going to be the entire country ICT, everything.
Absolutely. No, in fact, what you mentioned is very correct. So the 5G is going to have a transformational impact across industries, as is rightly pointed out. And if you really see, 5G is about three pieces of the puzzle which have to come together. One is the communication infrastructure, and a certain amount of rollouts have happened in India in 5G, which is currently just giving you a faster version of 4G. Let's put it, which actually speaking is not that relevant. It's nice to have, but not a must-have, if I were to put it in the jargon that we all use, right? But there are two other pieces of the puzzle, which is, so once you have the infrastructure, and by the way, I would say the rollout of 5G will take 3 to 4 years to complete, because 5G will require to be much more deeper into the network. If you have 1 lakh base stations, you'll probably need 10 lakh base stations of the large, small kind to be able to do 5G, and maybe more, because it's a 1 to 10x kind of a tele density increase that you have to have for 5G saturation. The second thing aspect of 5G is actually putting together the sensors, the compute platforms, the cloud platforms, clouds at the edge, cloud at the core, so that all the stuff that is coming out of 5G gets processed by those, those utilities. And then the third piece of the puzzle, which is at the topmost layer, is the applications. So you have a 5G application for how to automate a port, how to automate a steel plant, how to have telemedicine working. So you'll require a bunch of apps at the top, or a software solution at the top. Then you'll have to have the sensors and the cloud and this compute, and then you have to have the communication infrastructure. So the three together make a usable 5G in a bigger sense. Now, the beauty of this is, if you look at India's core advantage, see, Indian IT service, this is where the IT meets the communication comes into picture. Indian IT services have been masters of the third thing, which is putting together the solution for verticals, whether it's retail, financials, banking, ports, transportation, whatever, right? So that piece is, we are there. So even if you are a, let's say, number one telecommunication equipment company in the world, you'll still need 2 and 3 to be giving the whole solution. So in India, 3 is our home market advantage, which is the IT solution provider. The 2 is getting in place because the cloud infrastructure, the sensor infrastructure, the IoT, the smart meterings, and all of that is getting. So if you really see, those things is what will take a little bit more time, because that requires a lot more stuff to be put on the ground, all of that stuff. The communication infrastructure is the backbone. So if I look at all the 3 things together, we actually can create useful, impactful, and valuable 5G use cases or solutions. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. It's probably going to take 2 to 3 years. It'll be a little bit of a trial and error. Maybe something works, something doesn't work, something is useful, something is not useful. But I would say once we perfect it in the next 2 to 3 years, this can then become a cookie cutter vertical ecosystem that we can take around the world. And it can create a very large export opportunity, because it's riding on top of the IT services, riding on top of the equipment capabilities, and riding on top of the manufacturing, which of course we're going to do as well.
Sounds very fascinating. So I was just wondering, maybe you can talk about 2 more companies, which one is your acquisition of Sankhya Labs. How is that helping? And also your synergy with your parent Tata Group. If you can speak about these 2 synergies.
Certainly. So first of all, so we talked about creating in the context of Tejas, I was saying now we make the wireline backbone equipment, we made the FTTX, now we're making the 4G and 5G base stations. So I think with Sankhya Labs, we basically saw 2 things, so 2 or 3 very interesting things. It's a Bangalore-based startup, around 14, 15-year-old, and very talented set of people. So there are 2 capabilities which are very interesting that we found. Number one was that if you go further in terms of you're designing the systems, a lot of it comes from semiconductor chips. And again, that is one area where the world has got shaken up after the COVID, in terms of chip shortage and all that. So I think Sankhya has some very good chip design capabilities. They have actually developed a few chipsets. They're probably one of the very few Indian companies who have developed chips which have sold in more than 100,000 pieces, in terms of different applications. So they do it for satellite communication. They do it for software-defined radios. But I would say that there's a proven chipset capability that is available in Sankhya. So that was very interesting. The second thing, they were working, and they have the largest US, one of the largest US broadcaster was an investor in their company. So along with them, they came up with a technology called broadcast as a service. So for example, if you think about it this way, a lot of TV stations around the world, the terrestrial TV used to be in the 400, 500, 600 megahertz UHF range, right? Now, nobody watches TV terrestrially. But think about it this way, when we talk of 700, 900 spectrum in the mobile telephony, it's the best spectrum. So when you look at the UHF spectrum, it is even more higher quality, higher coverage. Now, if you can use that spectrum as a broadcast service, where you can offload a lot of content from the mobile networks, which will be choked for different applications, onto broadcast. For example, if you have IPL going on, you want to have, everybody's going to watch. So if you can offload that. if you want to give a classroom, which is a primarily a one-way communication across the country, and if you can just basically have a scenario where, instead of a TV content, you basically stream any IP content and use that infrastructure to broadcast. So broadcast as a service requires a 5G advanced. It's a new standard which is coming in. So these guys had been working in some areas. So we believe that those are all interesting technologies. For example, broadcast as a service in a US context will have a different rule. Think about all the cars which are going to electric cars, which are going to be going around. Now you need a software upgrade for 100,000 cars or a few 100,000 cars, and it's a complex software. Can you broadcast that, stream of software upgrade, which you can just, download on your car wherever and by the way, even in US, you go to rural US, the mobile connectivity is poor and so on. So I think there's some new technology that we get. So along with the team, people, technology. So we believe that those integrations will happen. Essentially, to me, telecommunication OEM business is about scale, scale of people, scale of business, scale of your financial capabilities. And you really need to do that. And I think with the acquisition of Sankhya, that's what we are attempting to do. So our thought process is that we need to create a larger Indian ecosystem between startups, people like ourselves, through M&As and all that, because that's the only way we can catch up and scale up. So that's how Sankhya fits into our scheme of things. The second thing you talked about is the Tata Sons, which is our parent company. So Tata invested in Tejas, and now they are 53-54% shareholders. So the benefit of being a part of the Tata Group, and for any Indian, I would say it's an aspiration that you work for the Tata Group. Those are the kind of institution credibility that they have created. So we basically get two advantages. Number one, that when we were trying to expand internationally, one of the things which was lacking is that we really don't have a brand for India as a country for providing products. We are a great brand for providing services, right, in the high tech, but we are not known for as a product nation. So if we take the brand and outside of India, if there's one brand which is recognized across sectors, across segments for many years, is the Tata brand. So if you can leverage that brand and then create world-class products, the acceptability of those, the trust of those, the longevity of those really is something that we can help to get international business as we scale the company globally. So that is one part. The second part of being a part of the Tata Group is they create institutions which last hundreds of years. So Tejas is a startup company. We are 23-year-old, so we're still there, but and we are still in the journey. So this is it's a long journey. It takes a long time to build, companies of good scale, of global scale. That that's a very, very large thing that we need to be. So I think being a part of the group, having the access to the balance sheet, the financial resources, the management talent, partnership with companies like TCS, who are the best IT solution provider in the world, who can help us put together the 5G ecosystem. Partnership with companies like Tata Communications, who are providing again bandwidth-led services. So I think we literally are within a part of the group where the best of the best is available as a part of a group infrastructure or ecosystem. And we really feel that it's a great thing for us to happen. And we think that this association will hopefully accelerate the journey for Tejas.
Yeah, thank you for that. So finally, I'd like to know maybe a bit about yourself. What is your background? How did you end up, launching Tejas Networks, and maybe something about the journey? To in brief, 23 years it's been. So what has been the journey like?
So first of all, I'm a technologist. Like most people in India, I did my engineering, then went to the US, studied my master's there, and then actually I joined a startup company in late 80s, which eventually became Cadence. And then, unlike most people of my generation in late 80s, I actually chose to come back to India and was one of the first employees of Cadence in India in 89 or somewhere there. So I was in the semiconductor design industry till 2000. By which time I was the managing director of a company called Synopsys, which is now the world's largest EDA or chip design software company. And then there was this urge, which I articulated earlier, is that, how come we don't have we are building products for the world, best in class. And we were, between being a part of Synopsys, which is the number one company in the world in its business, and doing a lot of very good work from India. We knew that it can be done from India, except that it was never done in terms of building products. So we essentially said, let's take it as a challenge. And me, along with my co-founders, Arnab and Kumar and Dr. Deshpande, who was in the US, we basically said that let's start a Indian product company in the telecommunication sector. So I switched from semiconductor to telecommunications. And today, actually, if you see, coincidentally, those are the two sectors which seem to have a very, very big role to play. So we did that. And then 23 years journey has been like any startup, ups and downs. So we raised about $100 million of private equity over 5 rounds. Proud to say we never did a down round. We always had an up round. The best of the best investors. And then in 2017, we went IPO. This was the first deep tech product company to go IPO in India. So we got listed. And then subsequently in 2021, Tata acquired a majority stake in Tejas. So I think when we talk about the journey of Tejas, it took initially how to build products, how to set up manufacturing, how to set up global support, sales, products. As for example, Tejas products are today working in 75 countries around the world. We can proudly say that we know how to build global products, right? So a lot of those things we learned along the way. Of course, there were ups and downs. There were near-death experience, at least in 2012, when the Indian telecom industry had collapsed post the 2G scam, and one of our largest customer, Nortel, went bankrupt. So basically, we got hit from every side, but to the resiliency and the character of the team, we got out of it. And net, I think we are in a situation where I would say we set ourselves up extremely well when the geopolitical situation changed, when the Indian Atmanirbhar story came along, and the PLI schemes came along to support us, when the new generation of 5G came up. I think now we have all the elements in place. We feel confident that it can be done from India for the world, and now it's just a question of time. So I feel very proud and excited to be able to be a part of such a journey. And needless to say, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of teamwork, and a lot of time and patience. Nothing happens fast. If you want to build something big, something good, unfortunately or fortunately, it just takes time.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks, because I think telecom industry last few decades have been really exciting. It's great your role in that, and I'm sure the future is going to be more exciting. So wish you and Tejas all the best for the future. I think greater days are
Thank you
ahead.
very much, and it's been
Yeah,
a pleasure talking to you. And I must also say that Dataquest has been the pioneer in your field in terms of tech
right,
reporting of our industry between Dataquest and voice and data. So
right.
keep up the good work,
Thank
and
you so much.
I think we really appreciate all the good things you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.